podcast. I'm here with my dear friend and Colombiana. She is an expat as well. She's going to share her journey not only to Spain, but also what immigration was like for her going to the USA. God bless America. Salome, thank you so much for taking the time to share your story with me. I appreciate you so much. I'm going to launch right into this. What was it like for you to move from Colombia to the USA?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm really excited. It was just, a little bit of a journey to get to this point, even to the podcast. We've
Always
been
is.
looking forward to doing this for a bit. And I just love our conversations and I'm glad that we're doing this. So let's see. Yes, moving from Colombia, there was a lot in between before I actually moved to the US. So I left my country when I was very, very young. I was just a teenager. And in my family, we're all kind of just travelers, a little bit of that gypsy soul. I have two older sisters that have been living abroad since they were very young as well. And so I started my journey actually in Argentina. So I first moved to Argentina, pursuing my career as a dancer. So I used to dance when I was little, and I went to Argentina thinking my next step is tango. And so where do you go to learn tango? Well, you go to Argentina. And so I moved there. Thankfully, I always had the support financially and emotionally and in all possible ways from my parents. They trusted me with the space and with the freedom to make these choices since I was really young. Well, Argentina didn't turn out very well for me for many different reasons, mainly health. So then I briefly went back to Colombia, but I
What
knew
was
that
that
my plan.
immigration process? Sorry to cut you off though. Was it fairly easy to get from Colombia to Argentina?
Yeah, you know what? Yes, because so we didn't need. So, okay, so the first step was to think for Colombians up until very recently, we needed visas to go pretty much anywhere, even just to go on vacation. It's like, well, maybe you can go to Ecuador or we can go to Russia without a visa, but who wants to go to Russia? I don't want to go to Russia. So, anyways,
Far. It's far. Far from
it's
Colombia anyway.
far and cold and just not my type of place. But anyway, so the initial process was that I could actually go directly without any sort of process before getting there. And
Okay.
then what I did was a deep research into what I would need, what documents to bring. And then once I would get there, formalize things at the university, then I could start a process to
Oh, I
apply for the
see.
student residency. So there was an option to do it from Argentina. And then obviously there wasn't that barrier with the language. And
Right.
we knew some people, like friends of friends and stuff, that were already there and could actually help me, like guiding the process of like which offices to
Yeah.
go. Again, I was very, very young. This was my first attempt to move abroad. And my parents have always supported me, but I've always kind of managed all my immigration stuff myself. That being said, I'm a very square-minded person and a bit of a nerd. So I like to do my research and I like to have my documents in check and step by step and to-dos list. And Brianna, you know a little bit about that. And so, yeah, and so it was interesting. Yet the first thing I was faced with, uh, as a very young Colombian woman, was facing that cultural stereotype of
Oh,
what a
yeah.
Colombian
Cool.
woman was. I didn't really understood what that meant for the rest of the world
Yeah.
until I moved abroad for the first time. And so that was very shocking. And I think, yes, there was a lot of physical, problems, my health and all logistics and all sorts of things that happened while I was there trying to establish that next
hmm
stage of my life and becoming a student there. But I also faced lots of resistance and lots of discrimination.
Because you were Colombian specifically, like,
Yes,
and there
yeah,
was a kind of like an idea that you were maybe some high tied to like drugs or
right.
promiscuity or like a
Yeah,
cartel or something similar.
yeah. I mean, the
Fun
first thing
stuff.
was to find like, hey, well, it's
Fun
great.
stuff. It's great. It's a
And
party.
I mean, like now, now I'm an adult now. I've lived my life. I've moved many places, gone, I've faced many people in uncomfortable situations where they
Yeah.
just kind of see me and, you know, bless them, they don't know any better, but it's like this
Bless them.
this idea of how is, you're a Colombian woman, but the first, before I open my mouth, that's not there, right? Before
Yeah.
they can identify my accent, there is not this idea of why is she not wearing super tight, sexy clothes, or, whatever it is that people think based on
Yeah.
telenovelas, that Colombians were a bit guilty of that as well, because that's what we show internationally with our television shows and stuff like that as well. So it's not just the rest of the world, but there is obviously a stereotype for pretty much every place in the world.
Yeah.
And for Colombians, unfortunately, the default is you're either a prostitute or a drug dealer, or gold digger. So one of those.
So either way, you're having a good time, basically.
I'm having a great time. And so
That's your idea of a good time, and great. Awesome.
as I moved there, I start questioning whether or not I can actually handle that. It's different
Yeah.
now. I'm almost 32. But back then I was, I don't know, 15, 16 years
Yes.
old. And so you're trying to navigate these situations by myself. Yes,
Yeah.
it is the same language, but it is a completely different culture. And I didn't find the kindest people along the way. And so that didn't help either. So I decided to just, okay, once my health issues kind of came in, I moved back to Colombia briefly, but with the plan always was I will continue my journey. I want to continue that idea of moving abroad, mainly because I've always had this thirst for that worldly knowledge,
Yeah.
to see things, to meet other people, even if it's harsh sometimes, even if
Right.
it's difficult. I like that idea, and I've always been passionate about languages, which is something I've been studying since I was little. It was always about that, about the world, about how other people see things, and experience family, and
Different
experience
perspectives. Yeah.
education, and experience the world. And the food.
Yeah, the food is always a good one. What a couple of things before we go into the next chapter of your life that I want to comment about Argentina, having spent a little bit of time there. The language is really funny because in my experience, I don't get this here in Spain, but I definitely got it in Argentina, where if you didn't say things with the right accent, they just don't understand you at all whatsoever, because their accent is a little bit different. But two things I thought was really funny in particular is that my son's father is British. And so there's a bit of political tension with them, with the, what is it, the Falkland Islands. And so he would always say he was Scottish, not English, which is really funny to me. And because people would hear our different accents and be like, where are you from? Where's she from? And it was like, oh, well, I'm American. And he'd be like, I'm Scottish. So that was really funny. But then when it comes to immigration, and this may have changed since last time I was there was 2 years ago. We spent a month there. And the fun thing about Argentina is that for a lot of people on certain passports, there's no limit to your 90-day tourist visa. So every time you leave Argentina, your 90 days restarts when you come back. So I've met people who have been there without visas, like real visas, because they just leave within their 90-day time frame. So I don't know if that's still true, but I could get away with that on my American passport. I don't know if you could get away with that on your Colombian passport, but that was what we were allowed to do. Our 90 days are restarted.
I think there is a general, this happens a lot. There's a lot of friction with Argentina. Like, that's changed. Okay. Let me take a step back. Argentina is a beautiful country. And before I decided to move there, obviously, like, one of my passions was tango. I'm a person who grew up with a very strong musical environment from my dad's side, and I appreciate music on a level I cannot explain to most people. And so obviously there's a lot of cultural heritage, from literature to music and architecture and so many things. Now, Argentina has a very, very deep, interesting, strong history. And before I moved there, I was like, there was this deep sense of admiration for what their, society has been able to face politically and socioeconomically. And so it's a country that's in constant change. It was, the most powerful economy in South America for a very long time as well. So I think there were so many positive things, the idea of their healthcare system and education system was extremely attractive to me. It was just this idea of like, wow, that's amazing, and they would receive students, especially from all over the place. And it was amazing. Now, that being said, it's also very different depending on where you go. Like my experience was in Buenos Aires, which is a very different dynamic versus, I mean, Argentina is a really big country. Even within Spain, you would find that as well. Depending on where you go, you will have a completely different experience.
Right,
And so
exactly.
maybe Buenos Aires wasn't the ideal place for me to start. And there was a lot of tension at the time. I remember even on national television in the news, there was a lot of just constant, they were constantly mocking the South American neighbors that they had to deal with, so there has always been this friction, whether it is from the football side of it, political side of it, or like the rest of the South American continent being just too loud and too folkloric and too whatever it is, and they're too Europeans for us. And so there was a lot of that constant, like subtle part of the culture at the time. And again, this was a long time ago, so I cannot speak for what Argentina is today. I have a very good friend of mine from childhood that has been there for 15 years and she loves it and is home and it's many different things. At the time, I remember walking around Buenos Aires and I saw outside many restaurants, Colombians are not allowed.
Oh, wow. That's
That
exciting. Nice.
sort of thing, right? So there was, and again, I'm not saying all of this just came out of nowhere. Obviously, there was a lot of people taking advantage of a system that in a way that maybe they shouldn't have. Not only Colombians, probably, from many places. There was crime that they just kind of, this wasn't just Colombians, but it was like this thing. And when, it's a phenomenon that happens like right now since the Venezuelan crisis. Now we just throw it all at Venezuelans are
Yeah.
it's their fault that we're having these levels of crisis. It was a little bit of all of that together, and then obviously from the 80s and the drug cartels in Colombia and Escobar and all of that, there was that big boom of like Colombians are this and this and this and this and that. And so there has been a lot of friction. And obviously the immigration, even in Argentina, and the history of it and how many descendants of Italians and Germans down there after World War II. So there is a lot of conflict around that topic. But I think overall, when I went there, I truly went with a sense of admiration and hoping to become, as I always do, a respectful part of a society. And I always try to do things right. It's not always. And the first and most important thing I will say in this podcast when it comes to immigration, it is not possible for people from a third world country to migrate if you are not in a privileged position. It is not. So I was able to move to many different countries. I was able to always have my documents in check, always have a legal status wherever I went, because I came from a privileged position, because I had my parents' financial support, because I was able to show that we could afford that. But if you don't have that, that's just not an option for people coming from a third world country. It is extremely difficult to settle somewhere or to even, this is Argentina, leave alone coming to Europe or, going into the USA, which is another level, and try to make it the right way. There is not always like a clear path on how to do that unless you come from a privileged position. So that's the first and most important thing I'll say regarding the immigration part of it.
Going to the US from Colombia, you did a little bit of a stint in Mallorca and Spain in between, but we can come back to that a little bit later. What was that process like?
Okay. The US embassy is feared by people, right? Like the first thing I'd say is it's even just the infrastructure of the place.
Okay.
Looks like a high security prison in Bogota. And so you literally, which is not what the other embassies look like. And so you go there and you literally have to go through like 5 security checks and you have to leave everything. You actually don't ever see the immigration officer that you're talking to. You have to talk to this dark window over a phone, and they don't allow you to like hand over the documents. You have to do it through this little like door, and it's just
What?
very intimidating. It's a very intimidating process.
Oh my gosh.
So we've always had to apply for a visa to even just visit the United States, right? And for most people, it's a lottery. It's like, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of applications daily, and just a percentage get it. There's a whole list of things. Even people have created like the things you have to do to get lucky and get the visa for the US. And, especially back then when it was more of that American dream and people wanted to go. And there was this big famous wish for quinceañeras in Colombia, which is I want to go to Orlando and I want to go to Disneyland, and I want to go to California to Disneyland or whatever. And there was this big thing. To me particularly, that was not my dream. And it wasn't really my intention until I met my current husband, which happens to be American. And then I'm like, oh, now I have to go through this process. But I had tried when I was little. My sister was a model. For work, she would have to travel constantly to Vegas and things, and she would go to different events with different designers. One of those times she told me like, it's your birthday. I think I was little. I don't know. I was 10 years old or something. So we applied for a visa and they denied it for me. And I was like, oh, okay, well. And it's expensive process too. I think people need to know that. It's expensive and it takes time and it takes a lot of paperwork. It's a whole, you have to go through the 200 checklist of documents you need to bring.
Yeah.
It's expensive. Think about, as of now, maybe the US dollars, Colombian minimum salary, or well, until I left Colombia or until a few years back, it was about $300 a month, and you're having to pay, I don't know, $150 for your application.
Yeah.
And so it's expensive. It's not something you can easily do. A lot of the times just to get the appointment would take months just to get it. And then so it's a long process as well. So it's not easy. So you apply. If you're applying for a visitor's visa, the good thing is once they approve it for 10 years with a maximum stay of 6 months at a time. Now, if you really use your visa to be there too often, this is something that is very carefully followed. Like, why were you here so long? Why are you coming back so soon? You always have this risk of like, okay, you have a visa, but if you arrive and the immigration officer in the United States is not comfortable with whatever reason you're presenting to go there for, then you can be denied and have to fly back. So it could be that you go through the process, you get your visa approved, and then you arrive there for vacation with your family, and they still send you back. That happens as well. So it's a whole process. And the part of the embassy to me was a bit humiliating, because at that point when I applied for the US visa, I had already traveled quite a bit. So I had already gone through visa processes to go to many other places. And I had never faced a situation in which I basically almost had to get naked to go through security and not even be able to talk to someone. It was this thing of like, and they would make an appointment for you at like, let's say 9 in the morning and keep you there until 5. And that's what you had to do. And so in that sense, it is what it is. And I don't know how it is in other parts of South America, but at least in the embassy in Bogota, that's how it works, or that's how it worked up until when I applied for that visa. What was that process like? So I was granted my visa, and then after that, you have to go through before that, you go through fingerprinting, and then after that, you go through some sort of process like that again, if I remember correctly. It's been many, many years. And then you have to wait for your passport to be sent back to your house with the visa.
They put it in like a physical visa.
Right. So it's a few more weeks. Again, for some people, the process can be quick. A lot of the times it takes, 3 to 6 months between it depends on the time as well. Like I know the last few years, it's been a longer wait. So some people are not finding appointments for like a year or two.
Wow.
So yeah, so it depends, right? So my parents got their visas as well, and they actually just went through the renewal process after 10 years, and they got their visas to basically, I mean, but the first time we went to Florida and stuff, and then my mom would come and visit me when I was living there. So yeah, so that's the first step. Now, once I moved to the US, I was having a long distance relationship with Scott, my current husband. And when we met, I was living here in Europe.
Mhm.
So I briefly went back to Colombia for a summer to be with my parents, and I was waiting for my 20, like I was waiting basically to the end of the summer to start a contract with Fly Emirates in Dubai. And in that time, Scott had asked me to go and visit him and see him in the US. So that's when I went through the process of getting this visa to go see him. So my first trip was just going to spend a few weeks with him, meet his family, meet his friends. In that trip, he tells me he wanted for us to be together to try to make it work. So my life goes upside down. I'm not sure whether or not I'm ready to take that step. So I told him like, look, I need time. So I came back to Colombia, spent some time with my parents, and then I told him we don't know if we would actually like work together. My plans are in Europe. Like my plans are between Europe and Dubai. I cannot, I
Right.
don't know how to like change my life, and like what would I do? Like the long distance relationship is not going to work for us if I'm 12-hour difference.
Yeah,
And
tricky.
living in Dubai and on the go most of the time, that's just not going to work.
Yeah.
So we were trying this idea of like, well, let's just come here again and let's see how it goes being together for, a month or two or whatever. And so I did that. And once I did that, we decided that, okay, we want to be together. Now, legally, how do we make that happen? Right? Like, okay, I'm sorry, that's my dog.
Coco,
Coco's there.
mi nube favorito con piernas.
He is my little fluff of life, real
Let
life.
heard.
Okay, he's saying hi for
She is.
everyone.
He's a
Sorry. You
baby.
can
He's a
go on and on.
baby. He's like, I
And so,
recognize that voice. Tell her to
yeah.
stop talking, Mom. Mom, tell her to
Well,
stop
no,
talking.
I don't think he can hear you right now because I have
Okay. Okay,
the
good.
AirPods in. But yeah, he just sat here. He just wanted some love. He's like, I'm sorry. The diva of the house has just arrived and
Yes, he's a
no
baby.
one's petting me.
He doesn't
Um,
understand.
so then at
Okay.
that time it was like my initial agreement with him because we had met in Europe, and when we met, his idea was that he wanted to move to Europe, and I was here already in a process that I
Mhm.
was going to school in Spain with a job offer in Dubai, and that was my plan. And he wanted to move. So I was like, if we do this, we agreed it would be temporary. But how do we make that happen?
Right.
I have a visa that only allows me to be visiting you for these 6 months. I had it in my head. I do like the idea of getting married for a document just wasn't attractive. I'm a romantic. I'm like, I don't want to get married for that. Like, I can just go back to Europe. Um, and so we went through many different like conversations about it. We consulted with a few lawyers. What are my options? And then at the end of the day, they all said like, or the easier, the fastest way for you to stay would be for you guys to get married so that then you can, stay beyond your visitor's visa
Hmm.
time until you move. You would get a green card and then you move. But then that whole process also would take, over a year. And then I could either do it from there or go back to Colombia and process it from there. But that would also put my studies, my plans, everything on hold. So we went through that and we decided like, okay, we'll get married and we'll go through this. Again, to me, it was always temporary, but that turned into almost a decade of my life living in Seattle and having a dog and having the first child. Now I'm almost due with the second one this
Almost
month.
two. Yeah, yeah.
That explains the late pregnancy phase and the hair.
Whatever, your hair's amazing. What was like something you learned during that visa like immigration process that was shocking or surprising to you?
Was terrified. This was the first time I actually hired a lawyer, an immigration lawyer, because again, up until that point, I had already moved a few times and I had done everything myself. Everything that had to do with immigration,
Hmm.
every single document, every single application, every single interview, I had done everything myself. And when we arrived, I found there was just so much pressure around it, and people talk about you have to, again, I had nothing to hide. Like our relationship was legit. We had this story in my head. It's like I just want to find a way to be with this person that I love
Right.
for the time being without jeopardizing my status at all.
Yeah.
Like again, I'm a traveler, moved many times. I've always had my documents, in check, and I don't want to I don't want to affect that. I don't want to have any records in my traveling life, and I don't want to do the wrong thing. I want to do it right. I want to do it properly. But I was terrified because it is true. It's a very aggressive process in which they really check a lot of very private parts of your life to make sure your relationship is legit. And some of
Wow.
the questions are very uncomfortable. And anyways, I mean, we had nothing to hide anyways. At that point, we had both, seen each other many, many times in many different countries. We had, you know, kind of already had a history of that relationship and pictures and trips and family and all the things that we had shared. So it worked for us, but it was a long process. What did I learn? I think it's just a matter of understanding that going through a process like this anywhere requires a level of commitment with that project, with that life project.
Hmm.
It's not just paperwork for a bank account. It's like,
Yeah.
and I also learned that it's not a system that's not in the US and not in most places. I think immigration systems have big, big, big flaws everywhere in terms of not really being user friendly, to say the least. No,
It's
it's
a
they
nice way
make
of
it more
putting it.
complicated. They make it more complicated than it needs to be. It is not for the average person.
Hmm.
It is not for someone who's not in a privileged position. Um, it's difficult to navigate, and I don't think most people are aware of um, the level of it's not efficient. It's not
Hmm. There's a lot of
easy.
bureaucracy.
It's
Yeah.
not yeah, and it's
And
not there, and it's not here, and it's not anywhere.
it's ever involved, like it's ever fluid, you know? It's always in flux. There's always something changing. And like sometimes, like one of my friends just had her visa approved, and because here in Spain, and all of a sudden it's being revoked because the paperwork wasn't submitted before a specific deadline. And but I had this documentation in at this point in time, and the attorney's like, yeah, I know, but now they're saying no. And you're just like,
Yeah,
okay, so even there's no guarantees. I think that's misunderstood, that just because
yeah,
something seemingly is, approved on the surface, there's lots of ambiguity. And if you're not, native to the country, they're gonna look after their own first.
some places you can kind of navigate the system yourself, but in a lot of them, again, if you look for the support from the government institutions, there is lots of misinformation.
Hmm.
So you don't get a straightforward answer, which a lot of the times causes not only delays, but the rejection of an application as well. And it's like people really didn't understand what is it that you wanted from them, what is it that they needed to present to you, what is the purpose behind this specific document or this specific part of the process.
Right.
Let alone if you don't, in the US, yeah, now there's a lot more resources, especially for Spanish speaker people, and
Right.
they do kind of like try to accommodate those things, but there is always that barrier as well. Like
Yeah.
if you're not completely fluent, you're always going to have that added barrier, which adds time and adds cost. That's the other thing. Back to it, it is costly, right? So I was able to get advice from a very good lawyer. At that point, we were in a financial position where we could afford it, and we had a lawyer that kind of walked us through it. and explained the whole thing for us. And I do remember having the conversation. I was like, you sure you want to go through this? If this is like a temporary thing, why don't you just go back to Colombia, try to, do these things? No, okay, we want to be together. We want to be together. We want to start a solid relationship and then potentially a family. And we want to have kids together and we want to move together and we want to build a life and all the, lovely things you have like the first year or two of a relationship.
Yeah, right, exactly. No.
Where you're like, oh yes, this is all I want. And so I do think there is not enough awareness, and that most Americans, and again, it's not just the US, like here in Spain, like most Spanish people and most Americans, if you're just born there, if you've never had to really go through many, like Americans didn't need a lot of visas to go many places. You can just show up. You have a limit on how much time you can spend there. But the average American person, if you do have a passport, from the fraction of Americans that have a passport and that have traveled outside of the US, it's very rare for them to have to go through this sort of process where you have to, I mean, worst case scenario, you applied online and you got an e-visa. So the idea of having to go through a checklist of documents, of translating, of knowing what's an apostille and what needs to be certified and what needs to be translated, and going to an actual office and answering a bunch of uncomfortable questions and pay ridiculous sums to be able to just have this thing that says, you know what, you're not a criminal, you can travel. And so most people in the first world just don't know that. And that doesn't make anybody bad. It just makes that you just don't have that perspective. You don't have that awareness. You don't know what that is like. And so when others are trying to go through it, it's like, well, I heard someone, but I just don't get it. Well, why don't they just if they've been here so long, why don't they just do this?
Yeah.
It's not so easy.
No,
and once you've been there and you've tried and it failed and you're stuck between the idea of like, okay, now how do, I didn't get to that point, but many people do. We're like, okay, I'm trying this and this didn't work out. And then how do I leave? And then how do I come back? And I already have a life here. Or, like, how do I make these things work? And it's like a lot of people, most people, I would say most immigrants in the United States want a legal status. And it is not easy to get, and it is expensive, and it is hard to navigate. And so I just think that having a little bit of awareness on it is not an easy process.
I also think that this is a good help to point out the law is written very gray. It can be kind of situational. As in the US, from certain things that I've read and certain things like in coming to Spain with the research, it's like there's certain things that are based on a particular situation. Like our visa to Spain, the first one, when Dominic went to apply for it, was denied because he was applying for it solo. And then when we came back as a family, it was approved, like applied for it as a family. So there's certain like things that in theory, it's the exact same paperwork that he submitted, minus my passport and our son's passport. That was like the only difference. And it all depends on how somebody looks at these documents and wants to interpret them. So a man applying singly wasn't as appealing to the Spanish government as a kid who's going to be part of the system learning the language in the school. That was more appealing to Spain, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
So
you just said something extremely important right there. And he's like, here and everywhere. Ultimately, your future is in the hands of the person that happens to open your file.
Exactly.
It's not the law. It's not what the law says. It's not which rights you have. Yes, you always have the options. If you educate yourself, which a lot of people don't have the energy, the time, or the level of understanding to do so for whatever reason, a lot of people maybe cannot even read whatever it is.
Yeah.
If you don't do your research and you don't understand all the sorts of like all the options that you have to appeal for this or appeal for that or whatever it is, ultimately you don't realize that you're applying to get a status in this system in which is not the cookie cutter. It's not the same for everyone. Exactly. It really comes down to the person who's looking at your file. Like when you first fly into the US with a visitor's visa, it really comes down to the person that's seeing you in that moment at the custom border control and looks at you and say, I think you're fine. And then maybe some other day you had to face some different, and then that person is like, oh, you have a red flag, you have to go to that office. It's like, it's the same exact person, same exact circumstances, but the only thing that changes is the person that's looking at you on the other side. Same with your paperwork at the end of the day. And I think this is very, very important for people to understand. You can try your best. You can have everything in order. You can have the best intentions. And I do believe this, like I've always tried my best because of what I understood very early on as what's this stereotype of the
Right.
Colombians outside of my country. My mission has always been to like, I have to make the difference. I have to be the example of the majority of my country who
Right.
does not behave like that, who
Yeah.
are not drug dealers or prostitutes or gold diggers or people that are trying to go abroad to take advantage of a system.
Right.
Most of us are not like that.
Yeah.
And I made it a purpose in my life to wherever I go. I don't want them to see that. I don't want them to face that stereotype. I want them to be able to sit with me and give me the opportunity to say, you know what? I'm an eloquent person and I'm an educated person and respectful, and I'm trying to do things right for me, for my family, and to be a role model for the children that I'm raising. Because it's not, it's frustrating to find that, as it is frustrating for anyone, as it is frustrating for Americans too that come to Europe and everyone's like, oh, you're not fat and silly. Well, no, it's
I'm not
same.
fat, but I'm definitely silly.
Well,
Also, too, Dominic, when his visa was canceled, when he lost his job in the US, like he got stopped, like I think at least twice that he got pulled for questioning, coming in and out of the US multiple times. They questioned him. So I think it's sometimes there are stereotypes, and sometimes like there are people who are, like you're saying, looking at your passport and being like, this is curious. Why are you coming back and forth? So for your life, once you're set up, you had to go through all of these like hurdles and loopholes and figure all this stuff out. What was life like for you as a Colombian in the US?
I would say the first part was very stressful because I was very limited into what I could do. It's like, not only now I'm here, yes, okay, I'm here with the person I love, I want to be here, but neither one of us had gone through that process before.
Right.
My husband, he's from there. This is his country. His family's from there. Everybody's from there. And the first thing I faced was the language barrier, probably. Like, okay, I spoke English before I moved to the US, but it wasn't the language I used daily. And growing up, I had more exposure to the British English. And so coming into the US and trying to fit into an environment or sitting with my husband's friends around a table or a restaurant, I just felt very overwhelmed. So I'm like, I don't know what they're saying. I don't understand the slang. I'm like, not me. I don't know what you
Not
mean.
me.
I do not know. I do not know. And so there was a lot of those uncomfortable moments. And then the idea of like, okay, you cannot work, you cannot volunteer. Even volunteer work is considered work.
Wow,
And so you
that's
cannot
crazy.
do that. And so I was looking into, okay, what can I do? I mean, I went from being this person, this woman who's been moving around the world since I was very, very young and studying and working and sorting out my things, to coming to live with my boyfriend in his country and not being able to make a dime, to not only not being able to make any money to like even pay, I don't know, for my pads and tampons,
Right.
but also
Yeah.
I'm here and I don't know how to spend my time, and so that was probably the most challenging part for both of us, because yes, we wanted to be together, but I didn't want to be a burden for my boyfriend, and my boyfriend didn't just adopt someone. He just like, he got into this relationship and then all of a sudden I feel like this because legally I cannot do anything. And so I had some, like, and I wasn't going to call my dad like, hey dad, so I moved with my boyfriend. Can you please like send me money to live my life with my boyfriend? Like,
Right,
that's just not how it works. And so that part I think was the the initial process of like, until I was able to figure that out, I didn't have a way of sorting out anything or feel productive in any way.
And that was like the
So,
restriction of your visa when you first came, like you couldn't work was like part of the
right, if
contingencies.
you go with a visitor's visa, so you're a visitor. So you're supposed to, you're there on vacation, and then to change my status until I was approved of my green card, which goes in parts. So first they give you once you go through that process, which took about 10 months, a year.
Wow.
You first have to get married before you apply for that, right? So there was the whole planning the wedding and getting married and then applying for that. And then you apply for that, and then you have to wait another 8 months, 10 months. You go through the interview, and then they give you a green card. It's a 2-year green card because it has some conditions that after 2 years you go into this reviewing process
Right.
where you show that you continue to be married with this person. So for those 2 years, your green card is still dependent on that marriage, on that union. And then
Sense.
after 2 years, but until you have that first document, you cannot legally work or do anything else.
It's
And
crazy.
so it was really, really challenging for both of us. And I think that really put our relationship to test, and my ability to adjust to an environment. Now, my husband's from Seattle. I moved to Seattle, and I thank the universe for allowing me to get to this place in particular. As I mean, Seattle is a beautiful city, but it's also quite liberal and progressive, and people are a bit more like it's a very diverse
Mm-hmm.
society and part of the US. And so it's like this little bubble of, people from all over. And that was nice, but it's still not my country.
Right.
And adjusting to the cultural differences. So one of the most challenging parts for me was making connections with
Yeah,
people.
absolutely.
People are very polite. People are very polite. People are very friendly in Seattle. When the sun comes out, is a magical place. It's like everyone is high. It's not the weed, it's the sun. Maybe the weed too, but it's the sun mainly. But people are very much to themselves, they call it the
Mm-hmm.
Seattle freeze. So adjusting to that was very hard because I'm very outgoing. And so I found myself in a place where I couldn't do much, and I couldn't really connect to anyone. Like making
Yeah.
friends was very, very difficult. Everyone kind of sticks to their, high school friends or college friends or work friends. And I had none of that. I didn't have a job space. I didn't have, I wasn't going to college. And my husband is 12 years older than me. So my husband's friends are in a different stage of life, or having kids, or, going through their full-time jobs. And, either way, it's an older group of people that are just living a different moment of their lives. And so that part was hard. Scott's family, they're lovely people, but they're very different, And so for me, it was like Colombians were a bit much, we're a bit much in that sense. We're too crazy and euphoric and too warm, and we're like either loving or hating or fighting or partying or something, but there's always something happening.
Sounds like Italians.
And it's very passionate, like you
Yeah,
feel
right?
everything very intensely. And my husband's family, they're very, stable. Just, things are nothing
Even.
major happens. And I was like, "Oh, let's spice this up." Didn't happen.
Latino flavor or
Yes,
Latina flavor. What
didn't
about
happen.
any prejudice or racism? Did you experience any of that living in the US?
Yeah, certainly. Yes, you would. I would find it. I would say not necessarily in Seattle, but I do remember. And again, our circle of friends, or the people that we would get together, like most of my husband's friends are Asian, and Seattle has like a 25% Asian population. So that was great for me because it's a little closer to like how we are. But I part of his family as from Montana and Idaho, and I remember making these trips. And again, his family always treated me with respect and, very, very nice people. But I do remember in Montana, get into a restaurant in which they wouldn't take my order because I had an accent. So, like these sort of things in which I just,
Nice.
or I was ignored or not. If I asked something, they wouldn't answer. Maybe I don't, if I just show up somewhere, the first image of me doesn't seem like a foreigner, but then obviously open my mouth and I have an accent because I'm
Like
right.
your accent is like so different though. It's like where could she be from? It's like let's play a game.
People ask me, where's your accent from? And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what I sound like. I don't know anymore. But yeah, so I did have a lot of these situations in which I always try to remind myself it's a lack of perspective. It's not me. It's a fear that comes from somewhere else. And you do have to go through that exercise because it's
Mm,
not, because otherwise you can take everything so personal.
hmm.
And I'm a very political person, and I've been fighting these stereotypes, and I've been traveling around the world from very early on, and I've been finding these everywhere. So it wasn't, that part of it wasn't new for me. It wasn't like, okay, a foreigner like strikes this alarm in your head or
Yeah.
something, especially in places that I was going to, like his grandpa, for example. We went to visit him many times, and he lived in a town in Montana of 253 people called Knoxon. And I mean, Montana is gorgeous. Oh my goodness. Like the mountains and the greenery and the animals. And it's like, it's a beautiful place, but it is a tiny town, and most people have probably been living there for most of their lives.
Yeah.
And if that's the world, that if that's all of your world, things are different, are gonna cause distress. And so I had to
Absolutely.
constantly remind myself, like, okay, take a deep breath. It's not you. I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm here visiting my partner's family, and I'm helping out in whatever way I can. We want to help him out with his house, uh, and doing all the things. And it's not me. It's not me. It's the lack of
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah, it's so
It's
hard
the
though to
lack
be
of
like,
understanding.
I
It
think I was talking with that about somebody the other day actually about how the lack of perspective and the lack of cultural experiences is really it is a hurdle, like because you're so used to like this way of thinking, and if you don't get out and just kind of see what the world has to offer, and it doesn't necessarily mean like physical travel, but just reading a book, or taking a class or watching a show, or it could be a million different things, but just to gain like insight that no place is the center of the universe, and there's is 8 billion different ways to live life,
yeah,
effectively,
yeah, yeah.
for lack of a better term. So when you guys were
I'm
relocating.
sorry. Let me just take that point right there, because you just said something that, I mean, to add to that, like, you are 100% right. And I think that one of the things that we're not taught, especially
Mm,
previous generations, is to question the way things are. It's something so
mm,
simple. Like, now we try to teach that to our children. But if you don't have that curiosity, if you don't question the way things are, if you
yeah.
don't try to maybe like, oh, why would someone on the other side think about this topic, then
Mm-hmm.
you don't have that critical point. As you said, it's not necessarily just about physically traveling or physically getting out of your comfort zone, but it is to intellectually question the way things are around you, not from a
Mm-hmm.
negative perspective, but just to know how else could we approach this.
Yeah.
And how else could we take in that difference into our world, and try to create some sort of understanding. I think no, most people don't do it, and I'm telling you this from like my own parents. But it's just a different generation. It's like, even in my country, there is a very, very racist part of the culture towards different demographics.
Yeah.
It's always something else. It could be just the Afro-Colombians in the Pacific. It could
Right.
be the Bolivians and the Ecuadorians and Peruvians, because they generally look more like the indigenous features. Or it could be so many different things that I now in
Yeah.
my head I'm like, oh, this is crazy, and doesn't make my parents bad people, doesn't make my grandparents bad people, but this
Yeah.
is just that innate like predisposition, that especially previous generations have faced, of like,
Oh,
you
yeah.
have to hate something, and it's hard.
Well, and I like that you said that, because I'm gonna use this as an example to show how societies shift. Like, first of all, can we talk about one of the things I really appreciate about raising kids now is the access to more diverse content and culturals. Like, we can just look at Disney movies, like just look at Encanto, right? Like, you actually get a rainbow of people because Colombia is a rainbow of brown, right? There's all different colors, there's all different skin complexions in that country, and you finally see it represented in a movie. So let's just, do a little shout out there. In that vein, and you and I have talked about this before, but like in my great grandparents moved to the United States from Italy in like 1918, I think it was 19 something, early 1900s. It's been 100 years, but on my great grandfather's naturalization paperwork, his skin is listed as brown. Is this Italian man who we would consider in today's culture and society, white, quote unquote white, but that shift of perspective, even in 100 years, about how Italians, when they first moved to America, were labeled as one thing, and that transition, and how society has evolved to, I guess, redistribute people, for lack of a better term, into different categories, and how those categories evolve. It's like, it doesn't make it right or wrong. It just makes it what it is. And that is a sliding scale. And sometimes like these things, and we won't go into a downward spiral of, racism as it pertains to many different things in our societies around the world today. But it is an interesting insight as to how immigration worked, the way people were looked at, how they were viewed when they came here, and how some of it has changed and evolved, and how other things, as we're kind of highlighting here, there's still a bit of ambiguity or prejudice or, a million other things surrounding this whole concept. But it's like, even 100 years ago, even 100 years ago, like, people were trying to come to different places for reasons.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really,
I think that's one of the comments that I get the most. And now, like, this is the darkest I've been because I've been in Spain for 3 years. So I'm like, I'm torn. Okay. But I do remember when I would get these comments so often. It's like, where are you from? Colombia. Oh, but you're so pale. And then I go like, I think it's an observation. So is that a good thing? It's like, I want to be like my mom. My mom is this dark, beautiful cinnamon tone. And then there is my dad that ruined it for me. But, I think just that simple observation right there, it's so important. And it's something that a lot of people don't stop to look at. When I went to school, we had, again, as you said, it's a rainbow. It's like from the darkest, most beautiful black tone to the most pale, transparent, blue eyes, blonde looking person. We have all of that. But the fact that it's not just even about the color of the skin is that rainbow in a place like Colombia shows it's the living representation of our history and our immigration history and
exactly.
how humans have how we have interacted with people from all over for so long. And we have, again, the more you go around the world, the more you realize we are more similar than we are different.
Yeah, I think that is like one of the best things to say is like we find so many reasons to divide ourselves. Oh, you're this, you're that, I mean, and we do it by accident here too, just as an expat community, because there are certain cultural nuances that are very Spanish and very, very Valencian that it's just not our norm, and they're very subtle, and it's not in your face, and it's not like anybody's trying to, ostracize or keep you in or out. But what we also fail to remember as human beings is that we gravitate towards things that are similar to us by naturally. So it's more likely that I would find a group of expats because we have something in common versus, now I do have Spanish friends. I see them all the time, but we converse mostly in English because my Spanish is crap, as you know. So I think it's really not. I think it's really interesting, just as a a sociological, like anthropology. I can't speak English today. Like an anthropology exercise. Anthropological is what I was trying to say. Exercise is how we are so similar, and there's so many things that unite us and bring us together. But then, like, we are different, and it's just having the marriage of those two things be okay. It's we're all humans, we're here, but equally there are things, whether we mean for it to or not, that we gravitate towards, and that doesn't make us right or wrong. It's just, can we honor that as humans? Like,
Yeah.
it's okay to want something different than your cultural norm, but also be okay with finding familiarity
Yeah. Yeah.
in a different place. Okay,
And
that's
and that comes from a beautiful comparison of like that familiarity in this case of expats connecting with expats comes from that our journey through all of those different paths to get to a place in which we're all foreign, right? Instead
yeah,
of like having the same cultural background or the same religion or the same,
yeah,
demographics. It's more about having that journey. And I think there is many, if you really sit down for more than 5 minutes with any person that you meet and you try to find a common point, you will always find a common point because we are human
absolutely,
beings and because we've
yeah.
all have a connecting dot somewhere in our story.
Exactly. Now let's talk about how it was for you and the family, because you're coming to Spain from the U.S. as a family. You have a beautiful daughter. She's one of my favorite little humans. How did that compare to your experiences in the U.S. and what did you learn from that big jump?
Oh,
Do we have enough time? Probably not.
do we? Mama knows not a part two. Well, at this point, I'm about to consider seriously your idea of becoming a consultant for people migrating to
I
Spain.
swear to God, you need to. You need to.
No, but well, because I guess the first thing is for the audience. I did live in Spain before when it was
Hmm.
just me. After Argentina, my second place was Spain. So I did go through the whole immigration process then as a student, and it was very different as a young Colombian student in Spain. So that aside, I'm not gonna get into details. Very different experience, also different time. I was able to, but it was challenging as well. One of the things that does stay true for me, it's like I knew from before we moved here that it's not clear, especially the Spanish immigration system is not clear. There is not like a final answer for anything, and there is no one way of doing things. And then there is what the law says, and then there is what's done, even by lawyers, even by people working in these government institutions. It is cultural, it is bureaucracy, it is many different things. I think one of the first things that you need to do when you consider moving to Spain or a country alike is to slow down. Lower your expectations on how quick you can get, like you can have a life here, but things are just gonna move at a different pace. And so you're just gonna have to adjust your
Okay.
routines and your expectations. So how quick can I actually set up a business? How quick can I get a job? How quick can my child just go to school and have all the paperwork and apply for this and do my renewal and get my fingerprints? And like it'll get done. Don't overstress yourself because I had to tell that to myself like all the time because I'm always stressed out about getting things done quick and efficient, and I'm even more so than my husband. So the first part was this wasn't my first time migrating, but it was my husband's first time. Like now he's a traveler. He's gone around the world and he's traveled and seen places and met people and all that stuff. But he has never moved outside of the US. So this was his first job. And this time we were bringing our daughter and our Fluffo. We have an 8-year-old Samoyed, the diva.
Maybe.
And so it's a whole different thing, moving by yourself versus moving with your family.
Mm.
We had a 5-year process trying to find the right place to do that. We knew from the beginning we wanted to move back to Europe at some point, and that was the plan. Now it took a little bit longer than we thought. But so facing that immigration system, first off, I do think, again, the language barrier massive. Speak both Spanish and English, and I will tell you, it is not the same when you get the information in English versus when you're able to actually read it and understand it and process it in Spanish. So it does help. Like my first advice, like it does help if you have someone that can assist you with that. Always compare what it says. Now we have such amazing digital tools,
Yeah.
but do compare it because there's a lot of things that get lost in translation, and a lot of those things are key to your process.
Hmm.
So moving, I had a few different fears. It's like what we tried to do. We came here with a non-lucrative, which is granted to you for a year initially. You cannot work, but you're allowed to live here.
Did you apply for that in the US or did you come on a tourist
We did.
visa?
No. So we did go through the embassy in the US, to the Spanish embassy. We actually flew to San Francisco from Seattle. We presented our paperwork, waited. It was actually a quick process. I think we had our appointment. It was end of February, beginning of March, and we moved to Spain. We arrived May 18, 2022.
And then can you tell me just a little bit about the non-lucrative visa applying in your home country versus in Spain? Is there a year difference? Like I know for the digital nomad, applying in Spain, we could get 3 years. And if we applied from the US or a foreign entity, we could only apply for 1 year at a time. So just
My
to compare.
understanding of the non-lucrative is that they will always give you an initial, because what they give you then, when you go through the embassy or the consulate, they won't give you the residence itself. What they will
Right.
give you is a visa that gives you the permit to live here. But then the actual process with the Spanish government happens when you get here.
Okay.
So you get, it's kind of like a pre-approval. My understanding
Gotcha.
with the non-lucrative is that you always get a year first.
Okay.
Then you can renew, and then they give you 2 more years after
Okay.
that. And then you can continue renewing up to 5 years. That's my understanding of the non-lucrative visa. Now, it is a visa that was created initially thinking on retired people,
Yeah.
right? Because you're not supposed to work on that visa, not here, not anywhere. Now, that's what it says. That's not how it is applied, right? Because a lot
Yeah.
of the people come with a non-lucrative visa, but they continue to have economical activity outside of the country, which is not illegal, but it is not how the visa was structured. So the idea is that you just come with this visa and you have to have the solvency to be able to live without working anywhere. So it was created for retired people that just simply get their pension money and they want to live here. It is, I would say, it's probably the easiest, fastest way, which is the reason why I chose it. We had different options. I was considering with a nomad visa wouldn't work for us because my husband has always worked independently. He had his own company there. We weren't going to work on that here.
Right.
I could have gone through a student visa and then try to bring him along with me.
I was gonna say, can you sponsor a
as my
family on a
family.
student on a
You can, if
Okay.
you have the financial
okay.
ways of
Got
doing
it.
so. But it was a longer process, and what it meant is like I
Gotcha.
had to commit to, on a
Cool.
specific program or
Right.
something, And we just didn't know, like, there is a big fear too. It's like, okay, we're making this big move. Scott's understanding of Spanish, of the language, was good enough. He felt confident with that. My daughter, well, she speaks Spanish. Like, I didn't think that would be the problem, but it's still a very, very different culture from both American culture and Colombian culture. So you don't know, right? Like if you're by yourself and you're here and you committed to a year living abroad and you are unhappy for whatever reason, you either put up with it or you figure out a way of going back or whatever. But with children, that's different, right?
Yeah.
With children, you have to think about, well, what if she really hates school there? What if she feels miserable? What if all the things that you know? And so we said, okay, this is perfect. It's a year. We'll try it out. First mistake, it'll take a month to find a place to live. So easy. We'll rent a place. It'll be easy. And so we booked an Airbnb. We arrived here knowing that this is very, very important. You get, from the moment you get your status granted and your moment of entry in Spain, you have 90 days to make an appointment to get your fingerprints taken and submit your paperwork, which is part of what you've already submitted at the consulate with the approval, your pre-approval for your residency, and a few additional documents that you have to present at the police station when you go to get your fingerprints taken. And then they give you the TIE, which is the most common question among expats. How do I get my NIE? How do I get my TIE? How do I renew it? Because it is that. Those first 90 days are crucial. If you take more than the 90 days to get your fingerprints taken. Not that you need to have it physical, but you need to have submitted your paperwork and gotten your fingerprints taken before that 90-day period ends in order for you to consider legal to stay in Spain. So that was the first thing in my head. Priority. So I did a checklist. I figured, okay, what do I need? What do I need to bring? What needs to be translated? What needs to be apostilled? Okay, very, very, very important to check for how long are these apostilles valid for each document.
Yes.
Another big one, because it's like, oh, this expired 2 days ago. I'm like, what do you mean? I just got it. It changes per document. So an apostille for a birth certificate doesn't last the same as an apostille for a marriage certificate, or it changes. So all of those things need to be looked at. Those change all the time as well. So it's important that you do your research, you come prepared by the time you arrive to Spain. Try to be as prepared as possible. There are certain parts of the process that you cannot do from abroad, but you can come as prepared as possible. Have someone that you work with for all of your translations, and just get that appointment first thing. You arrive, if you can, the next day, start on getting the appointment. Highly recommend that getting a digital signature. It's easy to do. Your local ayuntamiento, there's different offices that do that. That will allow you, especially for expats, and if you don't speak the language, that would allow you to navigate the system online mostly and get your appointments and get your things set up and keep track of it a bit easier. So digital signatures, get that appointment. So 2 things to do first: the appointment for the fingerprints, empadronamiento as soon as you have a somewhat permanent residence. Empadronamiento.
It's important to note that a lot of these appointments, especially in Valencia, are very difficult to get. Like there's only certain days you can go at certain times, and there's only so many appointments available. So people really stress about this. And in certain ways, I know that some people, they have some flexibility as long as you have your paperwork, but like exactly what you're saying, if any of that expires before you get there, or depending on your visa, it can be very overwhelming. So not to like shock people, but just to like inform as soon as you're get on that, because it's a fun one.
Yeah. So those are the 2 points to kind of take out of, your list. It's getting that fingerprint, and as soon as you have a contract, whether it is a rental agreement or whatever you're going to be staying, then do your empadronamiento, because those are the 2 things that you're going to need pretty much for everything moving forward. Now, getting those 2 things within the first 90 days is already enough, along with trying to settle in and find a place. And, then if you have children, then the school part is something else. But I would say that that was the most challenging thing. Is I did not expect I had already been living in the US for almost 10 years. So it was shocking to have to slow down that much and not being able to like do simple things, the banks are the worst. The banks are the worst. So just open an account online with, I would say just do it online. Don't go to an office, because they will limit you to that office. That office in the entire country is got to handle all of your paperwork. So do it online. Do yourself a favor. Do it online. You do need a Spanish bank account. You can open one in just a few minutes. Put some money in there.
Or at least get a Wiser, what's that other one? Revolt. And there's another one
Revolut's
too.
good.
And just to get some things flowing, because but you're absolutely right. Like Dominic has a nickel account he puts money into. And then for us, I have a BBVA account, but that was tricky for me to get because I'm not the visa holder. So I had to go in with all this documentation, with my rent agreement, with my NIA number, with all the things. I had to say that I was just a stay-at-home mom and all of this stuff, and play with the boxes in order to get my account done. Because it all depends on what your visa is, who's the holder, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's lots of
back to depends on the person that is assisting you in that moment. So you will go to the same bank, even the same office. But if you talk to 5 different people, you will get 5 different versions of how it's done.
Yeah.
So just go with the first one that receives you. Normally, you're able to just open up an account initially, because they want proof of residency, but you're not going to have it right away, and you are going to need an account right away. So some banks will allow you to open an account with a passport, with the commitment, word commitment that you're gonna update your document as soon as you get your NIE. So
Exactly.
they will chase you for that, because they will give you a time, and then they will flag your account if after a few months you haven't updated your documentation. But
Yeah.
at least to get the account started, you can do it with your passport. So do that. Sometimes you can do it online. If not, then you do have to choose an office. I would advise against BBUVA, and maybe they're going to sue me for this, but I would advise against. I have BBUVA and I am sick of this bank. Go to another one.
I've had a great experience, just for... I'm the mom who knows not. My name is Brianna. That was our interview with Salome. We had to cut it a little bit short because of time constraints, but we still hope you learned something you didn't know you needed to know.